welcome everybody. It's your boy, VSW Stunner, with a very special episode of VSW podcast. And that's right, our guest is coming all the way from the West Virginia territory. Deep down, we're stepping out of New England tonight. The one and only Cole Cash.
What's going on, man?
How's it going?
Oh, not too bad. We actually got a little bit of nice weather here in West Virginia today.
Not here. It's been still cold. It's like it was wanting to be nice for like 2 days. Spring was there, and then I feel like it's been colder lately than it was during our winter. It's ridiculous out here.
That's what we had, dude. Well, if it tracks the same way here, you got a good day coming up like tomorrow or Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I'm a warm weather person. And I feel like New England, I mean, why it's always been whatever, weather-wise, and it's never been this erratic, Over the years, every year it just gets a little bit more wild, a little bit more crazier. And that's everywhere. I mean, the weather's just changing everywhere for whatever reasons it might be out there. There's all these conspiracies and different things, whether it be global warming or, weather machines by mass governments. All of it, over the years, though, has changed, I feel. At least for me, as when I was a kid, I remember it being a lot warmer and seasons kind of feeling like seasons where they belong. But that's a topic.
Yeah, we used to have real seasons. But hey, it looks like according to your background, you're in the tropics somewhere. It looks nice there.
Yes, when I'm podcasting, I'm always warm and I'm always happy. So, I mean, I like to do this as much as I can because the weather is always great here at the VSW. I will agree on that one.
Well, thanks for having me on.
You're most welcome. So tell me, you're a pro wrestler and, you got some things coming up, but you used to do some things in the past. Tell me, what got you into wrestling? When did that all come about?
I think the very first memory I have of wrestling was watching an NWA pay-per-view at my, I didn't know there were pay-per-views back then. It was at my uncle's house. He had a satellite. And he got an NWA event, and I remember the Road Warriors and Sting, like early days Sting. And the Road Warriors were in their dominant period. And I just remember seeing those dudes and just being like, this is giant comic book characters. Like, this is badass. And then it just grew from there. I got really into, I was mostly an NWA, WCW kid. Bret Hart over in WWF, a few of those guys I was really into, but I was mostly an NWA, WCW kid at heart. And then backyard wrestling, of course, happened, and it just kept going. I've always loved wrestling. I'm a huge comic book fan, so wrestling used to just be big comic book, like it was just a comic book come to life. So it drew me in quick.
Totally, and I love getting people out of New England because New England's great wrestling, and I'm never going to take we have some of the best. Some of the best have come here, but talking to fans and talking to wrestlers and talking to a lot of the people that. Their stories are always like a lot of similar to me. And that was, through WWF or, and now it's WWE, but it was WWF at the time. Some of us WCW, some of us, later ECW, NWA, not really, because at the time, if you didn't get, have a satellite or something, you weren't getting all these other channels. So what was local. And for everybody here, it was WWF. So everybody comes into wrestling with this kind of a different format. Me personally, I started, exactly what you just said, those comic book characters. And one of them for me was King Kong Bundy. I seen this guy wrestling in a cage and I was just like drawn to it. I was very young. I didn't know what I was getting into. My parents had watched wrestling a little bit. My grandparents had watched wrestling, they came over from Italy. And when they came here, that's what they used to do for entertainment. They used to go to Boston Garden and watch wrestling. And, just check things out. And so I kind of just, started watching it more and just got into it. But, I eventually did, branch out to WCW. But a lot of people, nowadays, they forget about that. And I feel like it's a total different style. WWE was more, showy. It put a little bit more money maybe into the production end, especially the early days. The later days, I feel like, WCW, the money went. But the earlier days, WWE had more of that production. But WCW had more of what I would call wrestling. and that was, more technical style. So I love getting guys, that grew up watching that because they have a whole different take on the industry, how they work, what they do. It's great.
I think I was drawn. My uncle and my dad both, when I was a kid, they both gave me the idea, or they put the idea in my head. Like you said, WWF at the time was really high production value, very much, or it's always been entertainment based. WWF, WWE, whatever. That's always entertainment first. But WCW, NWA back then, you would see guys that look like a dude you would see in a bar, like big, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, just these like balding, kind of thick dudes, just look like guys in a bar that would beat the hell out of you. And I remember as a kid, it would always be my uncle, my dad, both like that WWF stuff's phony and fake. Now NWA, like that's the real shit. So like I always had that idea of like, well, one's kind of real, legitimate, and one's total fake. So I think that's why I always kind of I've definitely I embraced the entertainment side later in my wrestling career more so, but I was always more on the realism side of things.
Yeah, no, and you had those kind of workers that did that, like people like Holly Race that were like really legitimate, tough people, locker room and in, whatever. So it did have more, I feel, of, this more, now it'd be considered like a Japanese strong style almost. Like it's more, hard hitting. It was more, let's see who's really tough. There probably was more, actually legitimate shoot fighting going on, just friendly shoot fighting. It wasn't anything serious, but let's see who's tougher for the next minute, and let's really do this thing. Where
Yes.
WWE was always, yes, heavily scripted. Let's do things for that shock factor later. Entertainment always did come first. And I did, as a kid, love growing between the two because WCW kind of, for me, started to turn into a little bit of both. It had a best of both worlds when, they would have things like Halloween Havoc. You would have this spin the wheel kind of cool event, but you'd get these great wrestlers like Vader and such working these shows. And, the wrestling was on point. So I remember, those memories of, definitely watching that and definitely switching between the two during, the wars.
Oh yeah.
The Monday Night Wars. That was a lot of fun for me because I like both brands and they both had, something different. Again, and the biggest shame I think in wrestling was, combining everything. I think, even though it was bought, it should have all just stayed separate because those separate brands of what kind of made wrestlers different. Not everybody was trying to be, a WWE star. They would, some wanted to be an NWA, some wanted to branch out, we're just now starting to get people to kind of see that there's other avenues in wrestling besides WWE because there are now. And there were before, but they weren't, spotlight like, there is now, like AEW, MLW, Ring of Honor, Impact, all these other promotions. But definitely, I loved having, different brands and different avenues. I wasn't one to just pick one. I wasn't, a side, I can't watch. I loved watching all the wrestling.
So going back real quick to you saying you were flip back and forth. I always love people that grew up like me in that era where there was Nitro and Raw. And I love hearing like people's routines, I guess, or whatever. Like, so for me and a buddy, I would watch Nitro and my buddy would watch Raw and we'd be on the phone together. And if something happened on one, we would like be updating each other or like, you got to switch over now and check this out. So we both have our coverage and keeping the other one up to date. And I just love when like people grew up in that same era and they're like, oh yeah, I'd switch back and forth, or I would do like I had like this routine and that routine. And that was what was awesome about it.
It is, and and then it got into the period of, well, kind of the internet kind of started to blossom and these forums would take place and then the dirt sheet started to get leaked. So then, wrestling, you started to realize, you were old. Because I always feel like wrestling just kind of grew with me. When I was born, it was like, for kind of, it was rock and roll era wrestling. And then it grew into like childhood and then it, matured as we went along. But just something about it all. It really was. But
Well,
without,
when it became one thing, like when it just became night, WCW got sold, and you didn't have that competition too. It took out the dream matches that we used to be able to, as kids, like I want to see the Undertaker wrestle Sting, and I want, whatever your dream matches were, unless a
well,
guy
that's
went to
the
a
thing.
company.
It did. It took away all of that. It took away, because as a kid, I was also a figure collector. So I'd buy figures that were WCW, I'd buy WWE figures, and I'd play with them. And, I
You
would
get to
love
have
to
your
have
match
these dream
then.
matches. But like I said, the internet kind of popped, so you could see these dirt sheets happening. So you realize, by this point also how kind of production worked, and if you've been to shows, right, 1 week was live, 1 week was taped. And I went to actually a tape show. It was a show actually Mick Foley won the title on. It was a taped show. So like I knew everything that was gonna happen, me and a couple of buddies, and all the people at home were just like that I knew were my friends, didn't have no idea. And I was like, I couldn't wait to tell them. I was
Oh,
that kind of person. But
you were one of the butts in the seats that Eric Bischoff was talking about during the Nitro broadcast of
well,
that.
and it wasn't even for that. It's like, okay, if you know what it is and you know what it's about, then here's what happens. And I would get shit all the time, me and my friends in school, because people would scream at us, wrestling's fake. We'd have other kids throwing things at us. We'd all sit together and talk about it at lunch because it was honestly a very big thing. DX was kind of popping off. Everybody was going around saying "suck it." New World
Yeah.
Order was on top. Everybody was going NWO for life. The Wolfpack, all of this. So when I did realize what was taped, sometimes I would read the dirt sheets, and on those weeks I would watch Nitro just because I knew what was going on.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, I would flip back and forth because I like to see wrestling. I grew up with Hogan, so seeing Hogan on WCW at first was like, oh my god, and then I wasn't a fan of his red and white, yellow when he was first in WCW. It was just kind of a knockoff. But when he really transformed it into that Hollywood Hogan character, it was like, oh my God, he has another level. And you had people like familiar faces like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and all these people. And it was like, wow, WCW is now this really edgy company. And it has that production value behind it now that it didn't have maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was unpredictable, man. Yeah.
You
didn't know what was
and
about to happen.
for a long time, it was honestly on the next level. It was the better promotion. I really enjoyed it better. I enjoyed what was going on there better. I mean, and it was very hard for WWE to kind of even compete. Anybody we saw, we kind of saw, but at that time, WCW was bringing in, they were bringing in, Hollywood actors and stuff. I know people didn't like that, but what's WWE doing today? Bringing in Hollywood actors.
Yeah. Yeah, when you could flip on Jay Leno
giving them titles.
Yeah, I mean, you could flip Jay Leno, see DDP and Bischoff and Hogan, and I mean, it was insane.
Well, people give shit to David Arquette, right, for winning that title. But what is the difference now with giving, Logan Paul the title?
Logan Paul's got a better springboard. I'll give him that.
He does, but he's still just an actor, or he's a YouTube actor, one's a movie actor, but they put a title on. That's something that was done, 10 years or 15 years, 20 years prior, and just shit on. But now it's okay, and it's whatever. But I mean, the same thing, WCW had a lot of innovation, and a lot of it, was a forerunner for a lot of things that are still happening today. But so. You said you did some backyard. I think we all did. Were you a fan of like ECW too?
Of what? Of ECW?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. My buddy taped the Barely Legal pay-per-view for me, and that was the first time I think I'd actually seen ECW. It used to be on like some public, not really public access, but local, like 2 a.m. You would every once in a while catch it on there, and I would see little bits and pieces, but Barely Legal was the first time I actually just watched the whole show, and it changed. I mean, it changed everything. I immediately was hooked, and there for the longest time, like nothing else mattered. It was ECW.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like that, especially like growing up, whether you watched, didn't really matter whether you watched WCW, WWF, and even NWA. And when ECW and somebody got a hold of that, it was just a total game changer for wrestling because it had a whole different rating system. It had a whole different maturity level. It had a whole different level of violence that wasn't really seen. Yes, things have been brutal, and things have always been brutal in wrestling. Even the '70s, there were very brutal matches out there, chain matches and rope and this and that. But it, it was never that deliberate. And this, back to back to back, and the characters that they had, Sabu, Rob Van Dam, New Jack, Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, all these people, they were regular people. They weren't they weren't, 9, 10, 8, 6 feet tall guys. They weren't,
Yeah.
they again looked like, someone that could be a fighter normally. And you put them with, weapons in these environments, and it was just something totally different. And I think it inspired a lot of people to say, hey, let me give this a shot.
It opened my eyes to that it kind of opened my eyes to the indie scene, like the independent scene. Like I remember PWI and stuff used to have the results in the back, and you would see uh Reckless Youth wrestled whoever. And but what, I'd always just be like, I don't know what, like, where are these things? Like, what is, and then ECW was the first time I think we got to see all. It doesn't have to be a giant arena or stadium. Like there's shows with like a small, I mean they had big houses sometimes, but it was still relatively a small crowd and just dudes going out there just doing their thing, like I was like, oh shit, there's a whole other world.
And especially those early shows, it wasn't WWE prices. It was far from it. It was very affordable. They wanted people to come out and have a good time. Um, and yeah, I remember the same thing. I'm a big magazine person. That's how I, got around wrestling. That's how I knew what was happening was those PWI magazines. I too could never find out where the shows were, but I did wait, every year for some reason the police department, would come to my house and they would ask for a donation. And if you donated, they would give you these wrestling tickets.
Oh,
So I'd always take the wrestling tickets, and I'd go to these shows. And the early indie scenes for me, anyways, I didn't really, there was characters there, but I didn't have an outlet to follow them, so I didn't really know anybody except the talent that they would bring in, like Honky Tonk Man, Hercules, not Hercules, Warlord. They brought in I Doink the Clown one time. They brought in a WCW ref. He was part of some big screw job storyline. They brought him in one year. They would bring in people, and those would be the people kind of remember. But there was, an indie scene under there, and there was regular guys, that would have matches. I just didn't really know about it. And again, you kind of look at the magazine and say, "Oh, this is cool," but this isn't really near me, or this is, where's that?
right.
As you grow older and you realize you can travel a bit, and wrestling isn't, it isn't sometimes, days away to get to another state. It's very feasible to drive across, places to go if you want to travel. I've driven pretty far just for one or two shows. I've driven to Jersey, I've driven to Pennsylvania, just for an indie show. And yeah, it's a hike, but it's not unrealistic. And especially if you're a worker now, you can travel across the country. But back then it seemed everything was so far away and
Yeah.
distant. Fast forward, on the indie scene, I could care less about those one ups, and it's like I'm coming to see, the boys and girls that have been wrestling, month after month after month. Because now there are platforms that are easily followable in the indie scene. It's not just a magazine once a month. There's social media. There is shows that you can follow along. There's things you can watch, YouTube. You name it, they got it. But you did the backyard thing. Then I take it you decided to go to a wrestling school.
So yeah, I was 16. A guy that did backyard with me. I don't know how this came about. One day he called me up. Hey, do you want to go have a tryout for NWA at the time. It was called NWA Ohio, West Virginia, I think. It ended up becoming NWA Tri-State. And he was like, I go, yeah, of course, whatever. And he's like, well, I got it hooked up for you. Um, you know, it's going to be this date and time. So like he was kind of my agent all of a sudden. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what the hell happened, but I went to the tryout, just real basic, bumping, running the ropes, all that stuff, and was offered a contract to a signing, like a training, like I agreed. I was 16, and you
Yeah.
could have put any like it could have been, hey, you owe us $50 million, and I'd just been like, yeah, fuck, I'll figure it out. So
It's
I
from the
signed.
NWA. Cool.
Yeah, NWA, man. Yeah, so I signed this contract to I think it was going to be a year of training, and I forget the dollar amount, but then I get home and I'm telling my mom, like I want to be a wrestler or whatever, like I got this, and she sees it and she's like, how the hell are you going to pay? Like we can't afford that. And then it became this whole thing where like, like you can't have a 16-year-old legally sign something, whatever. So it kind of fell through initially, and then 6, 7 months later, the promoter gets a hold of me. Hey, you still interested in becoming a wrestler? I was like, of course. And he's like, if you will, basically travel the roads with us, help set up, help fly our towns, you're in, you're whatever. And yeah, anything, I would have done absolutely anything. So I think my first actual match, I had a match when I was 17 for that promotion, and I was not trained hardly at all. I had no gear. They needed a match. They needed a filler match to open the show because a couple guys canceled. So he reached out to me. Hey, you want to grab one of your backyard buddies and you guys do a match? And so I was like, well, fuck yeah. So we did that. I can't tell you anything about that match. I know it was at the Dill Center in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Uh, and the only thing I can remember is my buddy. His name was Carl. Can't remember what he was wrestling as at the time, but he was so excited because he got to high five fans on the way out. Uh, and that's all he cared about. And that's the only thing I can tell you about that match.
That's great. That's that backyard stardom right there, though.
Yeah,
Like
shit.
you
So,
don't get those kind of fans in the backyard. So when you get it in real life, you want that pop.
oh man, he was. I don't even know how. I forget if I had any thoughts at all. Like I think I was just like in like tunnel vision, But then that would have probably been right before I turned 18. So then, like right when I turned 18, I had my first match somewhere in a little town in Ohio, and it was the main event, a 6-man tag. There's a dude he's a pretty big. He was big locally here. His name was Viper, and it was me, him, and I forget the other guys involved. But the only thing I remember is after the match, Viper had pissed off one of the fans so bad that the guy went out to his truck, got a gun, and came back in and was going to shoot Viper and everything. And I just remember I was like, I'm so fucking in. Like this is the life, man. Like this is nuts. And then I just kept on going.
Oh wow, that's wild. Because well, yeah, it's West Virginia. It's different than here in Mass, but you can't. People don't check. People don't usually do that here in Mass. Well, they don't even have the gun laws. It's all different. But that's good work though. If you can get. And I remember New Jack saying that, too. He talked about that because he had a gun pulled on him several times as well, and it's like, especially in the southern states, and they didn't like him very much. And he said if you could get people to do that, like that's crazy heat. That's what you
Oh,
want. So,
it's the best. It's the best. Uh,
um,
I
obviously
remember.
nobody wants to get hurt in pro wrestling over that, but I'm just saying to get people to draw that emotion, that's real power right there.
It,
You're invoking such emotion.
there's no adrenaline rush. There's nothing I've ever done in my life. No high, no adrenaline. Nothing compares to pissing someone off to the point where like I've got a few stories about fans jumping in rings on me, and there's no higher feeling than hearing like if because the one in particular I heard him behind me. I heard somebody kind of hit the apron, and I knew that there was nobody else out there that sort of had to be a fan. And just the adrenaline rush went through me where I was like, oh, fuck yes. Like, and I knew, and I just turned, and there the guy was like coming through, and I was like, "You're fucking done, buddy. Like, I don't know what you're thinking right now." So that
Yeah,
feeling is the best.
yeah, like when that happens, all bets are kind of off when they step into your world. That's that line you just never cross.
Yeah.
No, unless unless you're part of that show, unless you're either a plant or you're one of the workers, you don't lay hands, you don't get in that ring, you don't do any of that. And once you do, like I said, all bets are off. You're not going to end up in a good spot. And well deserved.
Well,
You know.
and when I came up, I mean, I had like a little bit of a old school upbringing, which was good. Like I like that I had that solid that foundation. Over the years, I've done training with people, and like I blend old school with a little more progressive, thinking. But the way I was brought up is if you're a worker and a guy gets in the ring or whatever, you cannot get your ass beat. Like if that dude that bought a ticket and sat in the crowd gets in the ring and kicks your ass, don't come back. Like,
oh yeah, that's breaking kayfabe. He shouldn't be able to beat you unless he's a wrestler
yeah.
himself.
So it's as soon as somebody crosses that line, you go into like almost a survival mode where you're just like, I cannot let you get the upper hand. Like I'm sorry, but what's about to happen to you is not going to be fun. Like,
no, and it's like, but I mean, again, it's crossing that line, and hopefully, there is security measures and people are kind of watching crowds, and I've seen, fans get too close and somebody will just, nicely kind of just swoop in. But there is once in those occasions, I've seen fans flip out. I've seen one fan, he got so mad at, wrestling, they were bickering back and forth. He said, "What did you say?" And he walked over and he took a chair and just threw it. And I'm like, holy shit, obviously the guy was just scored out. He's swearing. And this dude was in his probably like 60 or 70s. He wasn't a young kid. He was going on a tangent. And I'm like, wow, that's some passion. And my wife's just sitting there soaking it up. And she loves that kind of shit. She's like, wow, that's good work, that. And I'm like, yeah, that is good heel work. And I'm a fan of heels for a lot of reasons. I like bad guys in movies. I like bad guys in general. But something about wrestlers and seeing them, get under people's nails like that. And just, like I said, just kind of fine tuning it as they go and tweaking it with each crowd. It's great to see it. So I guess if you majorly played a heel in your career.
yeah, I'd say probably if you broke it down into percentages, I'd say majority. I definitely was a face quite like I definitely prefer the heel role. That's my bread and butter. That's my natural state, I think, as far as being a wrestler goes. So yeah, that's fun when you get to be the heel. I think a lot of times, since I'm a bigger guy, it just made sense for me to be the heel. And then as I got a little bit older into the career, you usually in wrestling too, like the heel's usually leading the match. So
Yeah.
I had to. There was one promotion I worked for that I couldn't get through the promoter's head that it made no sense that I was the face working a bunch of young guys, and I was bigger than all of them. I'd been around for a lot longer, and I was just like, dude, it makes no sense that I'm leading the match as the face.
There's
Like,
no threat. Yeah, there's like nothing to overcome. It's like, what's this?
yeah,
Like, you need to be like King Kong Bundy versus the three midgets. Like, that's what you need. Like that's the heel, that's the bad guy. Let's defeat the giant, or whatever the storyline may be. But it's gonna make sense, like you just said. And that's the psychology of wrestling. I think some people forget about that. They just want to see, somebody go head to head, but they forget about the psychology of it all. And is this gonna make sense in a story? Is this gonna make sense, in the wrestling world? Yes, as an athletic competition, it probably looks great. Some of these matches on paper. And they might look, spectacular. They might even be very good. But again, it's just either, like I said, the psychology. In WWE, they didn't really do, bad guys versus bad guys very often. If they did, it was very, very rare. I remember one, and it was probably one of my favorite matches was Shawn Michaels versus Rick Martel, and they
Yeah.
went head to head.
Over the love of Sherry.
Yeah, but it didn't happen often, and you didn't see it often, but it had to make sense. And like you said, some things just don't make sense. But yeah, that's good though. So so you went around with them, and how was it? So were you in school at the time? Did you get out of school? Were you done with school?
So when I had started, I was in my senior year. Uh, I remember I was the only kid at my high school that didn't go to a single dance, the prom, graduation, nothing. I had shows on all of those.
For the weekends,
And
yeah.
yeah, I didn't have time for that school shit anymore. So I do still run into some people I went to school with, and they clearly remember I'm the one that wasn't there for like graduation. I was the only like, yeah, I basically my senior year there I only had 2 classes, and I actually got both of my teachers to agree that if as long as I could turn in everything at the end, or if I could turn in everything on a Friday and keep an A average, I didn't have to show up. Uh, so I was never in school. I'd leave on a Thursday, or I'd stop, drop off work on a Thursday morning, head out, and get back on like a Sunday.
Now, did at this point did people start recognizing you like in the wrestling world? Were people watching you and like were you getting like kind of fandom at school? People kind of like, well,
No, I went out
no,
of my way to not. I don't know why. It's such a different time now. Like I see a lot of the younger guys that I help train, or just kids I know that kind of started a few years back, and it's such a different world now with social media. At the time, I think I was still in that mindset of like I can't let people know I'm a normal person that just walks around. Like I have to be like, they have to think of me as like, because like when I was a kid or when I was younger, I didn't think Bret Hart was a guy that I could run into. Like Bret Hart was Bret Hart. He was
yeah, yeah. These
he was
people
straight off of
are
my
just
TV.
legends, larger than life characters. I
Yeah.
mean, they're
So I
not at
didn't
your
let
local
I was
groceries.
very I kept that very close to the close, under the vest. I wrestled in Parkersburg a lot, which is where I lived, but I didn't advertise that I was a wrestler. I avoided ever really talking about it.
And
So
that's kind of like keeping that kayfabe alive and well, I feel. I mean, and I guess that is the difference now. Where like today, people almost know that you're a wrestler because you got to do a lot of. It's not just show up to the show anymore. You got to do a lot of self promotion in between the show. You got to run social media pages, to be successful, to get things going. You got to do interviews, podcasts, different things to get your name out there. There's a lot more involvement in between the shows now for indie guys.
oh,
Uh,
I'm so jealous of the guys these days. Like over the past few years, I'm so jealous of the world they get to grow up in wrestling, because they don't ever even have to step foot into a town, and they could already be known in that town. You have the ability to make those connections through social media and let a fan base, like, so, up in New England, a kid from down here in Parkersburg has the ability to let those people know in New England who he is, who she is, what they're all about. And then when they show up, there's people that already know them. And that's such a huge advantage now. And I love when I see some of the younger guys, or, some of the older guys have been around for a while. I love seeing them take advantage of social media and what it can do for you.
Oh, it can do wonders, and it can do wonders not just in the networking, but also just in the character work. You can build these stories through social media. You can have these feuds that taking place. You can do funny memes of your opponent. You can be so creative, doing real shorts and all these other things, and just really, and also showcasing what you do. There's a lot of footage to be taken out there. I love taking footage because there's so much to show. But for wrestlers, I always urge them, get footage of yourselves. You can showcase yourself. Why not? This will entice people to say, hey, well, that's cool. I want to see this guy, or that looks fun, or whatever it might be. You never know who's going to see what on social media because, the algorithms go everywhere. You don't know who or what promoter is going to flash by and they're going to be like, hey, I like this kid. Let me follow him. Or let me give him, a ring. I might want to use him. And next thing you know, you got a TV deal somewhere. Um, like you said, back in the day, there was no IWTV. There was none of this, where a whole nation can kind of watch you wrestle. It was your local fans, and you were hoping to see them again next month or next time you ran.
Yeah, I mean, if you take like just using like let's use Orange Cassidy as an example. A guy like Orange Cassidy 20 years ago, I don't know how long Orange has been wrestling. I'm not sure, but 20 years ago, say he started the same time I did, basically. That dude shows up with that same gimmick and nobody knows who he is. He's probably going to win people over by the end of the night, and then if he comes back, they're going to know. But he's not walking in. His music's not hitting, and people aren't going crazy. Like people aren't being like, "Holy shit, it's Orange Cassidy." But now he was able to get like almost a cult following just because of all the clips that would go around, and people would be like, "This dude's awesome! Like I want to see this. This is fun. This is awesome. This is cool. I want to see
Oh
that."
yeah, I mean, we've been blessed, like I said, in the Northeast with guys like Orange Cassidy. He's been at Beyond in several shows, and one of the shows I remember, went to it, and there he was, and we went to it knowing Orange Cassidy was going to be there. We were just hyped for this thing because, we heard, we've seen the funny clips, we've seen, the gimmicks, and so when he was there, it's like awesome. And then he had the meet and greet, we got to meet him, and he was just this really cool dude. He was like he was on TV. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, the time, we went to that IWTV 100 out in Pennsylvania. And he was wrestling at that too. And it was pandemic era. And you had to wear the mask and everything. And, inside this arena, it wasn't a big arena, but it's like a good sized warehouse. And it was really, really hot day. And they closed the doors and it was cooking up inside there. It was probably over 100 easily. So at the end, everybody just, goes outside. Orange is just out there just, getting fresh air. And he's like, anybody need anything signed or whatever? And like my friend had, our Orange Cassidy figures, got them signed. He just signed them, to have a good day. Very cool guy. But yeah, people already know him. They already, and I think that's how people can become draws and get people, to cross market the crowd. Because there's people that we definitely get. I'm go to a lot of Maine wrestling, and Limitless is one of my fan base. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
they get a lot of guys from all over the country. And when they do, it's great because you do already know them, but they're huge names.
Well, it's just an easier guys now have such an easier, not maybe not easier, but better access to get booked places. Like, because I come from the days of promo or basically promo kits. So you'd have your matches or whatever. You'd put it on a VHS tape. You'd type up a little resume, print it out. You'd send that and then you just mail out packages all day long to any promotion you could get an address for. And you hoped you maybe got a call. But like nowadays, you basically hit up a promoter or whoever on Facebook, or you add them as friends, and you're showing your shit off. And if you got something that's going to sell, people are going to reach out to you and want you on their show.
I mean, if you're already known, you can even go to the show. They might take you. You never know nowadays.
We tried that years ago. We tried me and Vance Desmond. I came up with Vance through wrestling. He started like a year after me, but one of my best friends. We came up together and we decided that we were going to go to a CZW show in Delaware. And we just drove there. It was, I don't think it was Cage of Death, but it was like I forget the show now, but we show up, we meet Zandig, and we're just like, hey, we're a couple of boys from we're from West Virginia. We drove up here. Just if you have a spot, we'd love to get on there. And they didn't have a spot, but it was one of those things where we were like, let's just fucking take a shot. Like, let's see if we can make it. I remember Desmond, he goes by Violent Vance Desmond. And so, but he's not like, he's aggressive. He's like a like a Brian Danielson violent, like, whatever. But like I remember, he doesn't do thumbtacks, light tubes, barbed wire, any of that shit.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember him telling Zandig, Violent Vance Desmond was my work name, and Zandig's like, oh, Violent, and I remember the look in Vance's eyes where he was just like, oh shit. So I think he was probably happy we didn't get booked because who knows what we would have been thrown into. But yeah, you used to just go places. You used to just show up and just be like, hi, I'm a wrestler. Could I get in the ring and do something? Like, you had no idea. You were basically just cold calling places.
yeah. And I mean, in some ways, I think it made people a little bit more hungry. It made people want to be more desirable. It gave people a little bit more drive. You
Yeah.
had to kind of go and do those things, even as promoters. You had to work, go and start handing out flyers, start stapling them. I mean, they still do that today, but it's not obviously as prominent because you got an event that you can add on Facebook and invite, all 5,000 of your friends or fans or 10,000
Yeah.
all at once, one shot, and everybody knows about the show. Where that wasn't the way it was. You had, like I said, I had trouble finding wrestling shows growing up. I didn't have no idea where they were running, and I'm sure there was tons because it's New England, and I know there is because I've seen footage now of shows and been like, oh, if I had known that, why didn't I go to this? Or why
Yeah.
didn't I go to that? But again, being that WWE fan, I went to, a bunch of their shows, obviously growing up, but again, that local scene, it wasn't accessible. It wasn't tangible as a kid. And where it is now, it's very tangible. And I feel like there's more, at least in Maya, there's more promotions than ever. You don't get just one running on the weekends. You got maybe 10. You got choices depending on where you live. You don't have to drive very far anymore. You can just go 5, 10, 15 minutes to a show instead of, hours on end. Or you could go hours if you want to do that route too. And like I said, depending on the town, I like to go to sometimes, to a further drive just to see guys and girls that I don't normally see. Because as you know, on the indie scene, nobody's really exclusive. So if you have a bunch of
No.
shows running similar areas, you're going to see a lot of the same guys and girls kind of, working similar matches. And after a while, it gets a little stale. But when you start bringing in, people that are killing it in other, regions, it's like, oh, this is something, we're not going to get to see very often. So how long did you end up running on with that promotion? Did you run with them a while, or just, how old were you?
So with Tri-State, I was there till it closed its doors. I actually uh I don't have a very good memory when it comes to timelines anymore. Everything could have happened at any point in time, and I get things reversed. But I was with them for quite a while. They were my main place. I mean, they were local. I was kind of all over the place though. But then the very last show we ever ran was uh myself versus a kid named Brandon Morgan in the main event, and it still kind of irritates me to this day because it was for their version of the X Division title, and the guy that held the heavyweight championship at the time, he was supposed to be in the main event, and he decided though that it was going to be his first big main event, and he was winning the heavyweight title that night, and it was his first big main event, and he legitimately got too nervous to be in the main event. So at the last minute, they switched the heavyweight title match to second to main and made us main. But everybody in the crowd saw the heavyweight title match happen and assumed, well, that must be the main event because it's the heavyweight title match. So we lost, by the time we got out there for our match, we had lost probably 50 fans.
People, yeah, once the bell rang, people started to just get up and walk out. And it's like,
Yeah. But that was probably up through, I want to say, 2008, 2009, maybe, something like that. And then at the time, we didn't like, it was very frowned upon for us to go to other places. I remember I was actually fired from that company on a few occasions for going and wrestling in other places because at the time we weren't supposed to do that.
yeah.
And
They,
I was,
they they wanted it to be exclusive. They wanted it without the contracts. Is what people wanted.
and
And
without the
even to
TV
this day,
exposure.
you'll hear people say, well, you only work for this or work for that. It's like, people need to work where they're comfortable working. People need to work who they want to work for. That's the beauty of being something called an independent. You
Yeah.
kind of get to pick and choose that. But yeah, I could see that back in the day, especially in territorial times. It's like, yeah, you're with us now. I don't want to see you work in another show. I don't want to see you, anywhere near the competition.
Well, some of the other places were other NWA affiliates, and there was always a lot of personal grudges between the promoters in some of those places. So if you showed up on another NWA promotion, it was bad. It was bad news. Like, you weren't supposed to do that. But we all kind of, after a few years of kind of just doing what our promoter led us to believe was the right thing to do, we all sort of just were like, yeah, fuck this, man. Like, this is what we want to do with our lives. Like, we got to do something. So we all started kind of branching out. The ones of us that were really serious about it, we all started branching out, traveling together, just all over the place. So I was up and down the East Coast, Midwest. Never quite made it out past the Midwest, unfortunately. But Midwest, East Coast, I was kind of just all over the place for quite a while.
Very nice, very nice. And then, would you take some time off? I take it.
So then I was starting to slow down a little bit, probably around 2017 ish. I was starting to slow down a bit. And then me and Desmond, Vance Desmond, opened up our own. We bought a gym. We opened a gym up, and then the gym had a big open space. We put a ring in and started a wrestling school. And from that, we started our own local promotion and ran for a year before COVID hit. And the shows, man, we were, I look back on it and maybe I'm biased, but we were hitting our stride, man. Like, we grew. Crowds went from about 25 people to standing room only. Everybody wanting a ticket for the next show before they left. Like, we were killing it, and then COVID hit. And
Yeah, that COVID did a number on indie wrestling in general. I mean, I'm taking it's like you was like with us, wrestling got shut down. We weren't allowed to go anywhere as fans. Wrestlers weren't allowed to go anywhere. You know, that year, the first year that it happened, Mania got shut down. Florida wouldn't get wrestling until a little bit later. So, all the people that had bookings to go out there, they got canceled out. Some places were still able to kind of function and do their thing, but for the most part, everybody got so deeply impacted. That's actually the time I started to do the podcasting because I started it gave me a chance to kind of slow down the pace and kind of review wrestling in a way because we got a little bit of luck, as the pandemic progressed a little bit, that the places with schools here were able to kind of, do some tapings. So we got to kind of see wrestling again through, YouTube. And, I was able to follow it and I was able to kind of, review it, recap it. I had time. It wasn't like, the once a month, shows and then kind of doing that. It was on a weekly platform and there was a bunch of promotions doing it. So I started doing that. I started interviewing guys and girls and I started, just trying to support things. So I saw, everybody suffering, just, literally suffering, I became a lot of friends with them over the years, a lot of the local guys and girls. I started going to the indie shows in around 2017, 18. I started reaching out to people and saw that, things, people would talkable. Social media was a great place and fans and you were embraced, by wrestlers. And it was cool. They were talking to you. It's like, this doesn't normally happen, prior to that, I was lucky, once in a great moon to get, the like by the superstar on WWE or AEW that I'm posting about, but then, the indie scene, you get more, it's more intimate in a way, like I said, so you're closer to the action. People remember you, they see you. You go to a bunch of shows, they start to see you. So when you post photos, they'll start to retweet you. The promotions themselves will start to notice you. And say, hey, cool things, and you guys can interact. It's a whole different world than, just watching TV wrestling. You can really get into it. So I was like, let me start to do interviews and start to go from there. But that's around the same time, that 2020 mark. So that's what I was going to ask, how did it really affect it, shut you down? But you still had, well, I mean, what'd you do to kind of ride that through? Because I mean, with the gym, you couldn't even kind of run that right at first.
No, yeah, we ended up selling the gym. There was another kind of a local gym that was mostly like powerlifting focused, and they needed a bigger spot. We were just in a position where it was a good time to sell. Uh, but then life happened, man. Like new jobs, real life kicked in, and I mean, my knees are still shot. My back's not great from all the bumps and everything, but not doing anything for a couple of years, like a lot of people, just did not help matters. And so I was honestly just like, man, I'm done. This is over. I had a good, I did what I wanted to do, and then I didn't think I was ever going to probably come back. There was always about a few times a year where like the spark would hit, and I'd be like, I got to get back in there. And then uh here recently, I've dropped since May. I'm down like 80 some pounds, feeling awesome.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I'm starting to kind of feel like my old self again, and the opportunity has risen. So hopefully, depending on the Logan Taylor accepting the challenge, hopefully April 27th in Parkersburg, I get to step back in the ring again for the first time in 5 years.
Oh, that's exciting. That's really exciting. Um, let me ask you, are you a little bit nervous?
Not yet, not yet. Maybe as we get a little bit closer. Right now, I'm just the creative juices are flowing again. I'm back to feeling that way where you're just picturing how what it's going to be like. So right now, it's excitement. Um, there's always a saying, the day you stop being nervous is the day you need to quit wrestling. I don't know if I don't think I've ever been nervous before a match or before a show. It's more so of I've always been, um, it's never been nervousness. It's always been like just that adrenaline rush. Like I look forward to that. And then when it kind of wears off, you start thinking about the next one and you kind of get nervous if like there's going to be there was always, is there going to be another one? Am I going to be able to keep doing this? I was always more nervous towards the end of like getting injured.
Yeah.
Uh, so because when I was younger, there was no way I could be injured. That couldn't happen. So
No, no. But as you get older, you see things are a little bit more
yeah,
delicate. But let me ask you, have you been able to get into the ring at all, though? Kind of work the rust off and do that kind of stuff?
not an actual ring. I've been able to hit some mats, do a few things. Definitely jarred the old body the first couple of times. Had to remember what that was like. So I think my body and my brain had forgotten a lot of that. So first time I kind of hit the mats, it really all went back to the brain again. So I was like, oh yeah, shit, this is what this is. So
Well, that's exciting, though. That is exciting. Now, let me ask you, looking back, and you've had a pretty lengthy career. What's been like your most favorite match?
uh few for different reasons. One of my favorites was against Tracy Smothers in a little tiny show in down near Huntington, West Virginia, and he was just the best dude to be in the ring with. Like, tried to make you laugh, tried to make you like you could not be nervous with him because he would just loosen you up. Like, and I mean, I watched Tracy Smothers when he was a young pistol, uh, in WCW and WA. So like that was amazing. I had a match against Vance Desmond in a bar here in Parkersburg. One of my favorite matches ever because uh, it was like a punk bar, and as soon as Desmond comes out, he's this dude that has like a six pack and the quote unquote pretty boy and in really good shape, and then here I come, mohawk, all covered in tattoos, and everybody's like, oh yeah, like fuck that guy up, they're on my side. And where we did a thing where I drug him out to the bar, and right before we get to the bar, he like cuts me off and he orders a Zima, and the crowd just starts, shitting all over him. And he turns around and I smack the Zima out of his hand and hit him with a suplex or something like that on the floor, and then order or I tell him to hand me the bottle of Jack. So they just hand me like a bottle of bourbon, and I'm just like hitting it, really hard. The crowd's losing their fucking minds. Like, that's fun. I love when the crowds are really interactive and just engaged. Yeah, I quite a few matches I'd say are up there for different reasons. A lot of time crowd reaction. Anytime you're hearing like the, fight forever, like those chants that you hear on like TV and stuff, when you're hearing that and you're in a match, or like holy shit chants, that shit just a whole different level of like adrenaline rush, where, and like just that high of like, we got them, like this is, they're hooked.
That's
So
bringing it home. So
like
it really does play a role, and I think that a lot of people have said, like even in the pandemic, the ones that did get to wrestle, the ones that did the taping and stuff, losing that fan reaction, even in WWE, losing that crowd reaction, losing the chants, losing all that, it really took the steam out of the wrestlers. I mean, they're like, we got no energy. We need that buildup. We need that throb from that kind of excitement.
Yeah. I don't know how those guys did it. Like, that had to be, because I mean, I did matches when we had the school. We were doing a weekly YouTube show where we would get like, we only had room for probably 5 to 10 fans. But we just invite people. We put it out on Facebook. Hey, we're doing a show this Saturday. First to respond that you want to be there, we'll take the first 10 people. So we would do that, but it was still like, even that many people, it's still just so hard to have that same energy level. And I've done shows where I did a show in Summersville, West Virginia, at a cabin. It was like a little resort campground thing, and we are all in the back waiting for the show to start. And 45 minutes for the show, the doors have been opened, no one's there, no one's showing up. 30 minutes, no one's showing up. 15 minutes, no one's showing up, and we're about to just say like, well, fuck it, we'll just do some training. Then about 5 minutes before we decided to cancel the show, the promoter was going to cancel the show, this old guy shows up, and he's 70 some years old. He shows up, buys a ticket. So the promoter comes back. We got one guy. He bought a ticket. We got a show. And we were like, all right, fuck it, let's go. So you got there, you got one guy. I mean, it's the old, I was always trained, whether there's one person in the seats or there's thousands, you give the show.
That's great, though. And a fan is a fan is a fan. That is so true. And we're just about out of time, but I just wanted to bring up another thing. You too are a podcast.
Yes. Middle-aged and mediocre. I do that with my buddy Joel Gant. We started it a few years back as we were both getting into stand-up comedy. And we started it at the time, it was called Rough Sets. And the idea behind it was to kind of talk about our, new journey into the world of stand-up comedy. And we interviewed comics after shows and open mics and stuff to ask them about rough sets, like what's the worst set you've had and stuff. And then that rolled into a different podcast that we did that was called What's Going On. And it was just a few of us got together. And then we finally, Middle-Aged and Mediocre. We've been doing that for a few years now, like 100 and some episodes. We do true crime, paranormal, UFOs, movie reviews. We've done all kinds of random shit. Sometimes things will happen in the world, like shit will be going on, and I'll decide, I'm a little bit more political activist minded than Joel, and I'll feel the need to be able to rant. So luckily for everybody, here's an episode where Cash bitches about things for a while. We've got all kinds of episodes. We do episodes every once in a while called Real Crimes, REEL, where Joel will present a movie, a horror movie typically, as a true crime in the style of a true crime. And so if anybody wants to check it out, Spotify.
I gotta check it out. This is like right up my alley. I'm about to have you come on again just to talk about all that and the true crime. That I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, anytime, man.
Us being, you know, in New England, you know, there's a lot of spooky shit up here, you know, even in Mass, we've had, you know, some crazy wild things. We're close to the Warren stuff and, you know,
Yeah.
the Annabelle doll and all of that stuff that's happened. And we have, you know, me, myself, I'm into that, you know, I like to go cemeteries, you know, hopping and see what's out there and, you know, take photos and stuff. That's really, like I said, really interesting. Like I said, we may have to do another episode or even like a Halloween episode or something
Oh,
when it
dude,
gets
yeah.
close to that time. But like I said, I'm really into that. And hopefully, like I said, you know, fans are too. I know my fans like horror, you know, and they're into that kind of stuff, horror movies and different things like that. And what was the name of that again, so they can follow it? And where can they follow that?
Middle-aged and mediocre. You can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple. We have a YouTube page where all the episodes automatically upload with the static image in the background. You can find us on Facebook. If you're one of the things I'll let everybody know, if you're a fan of your traditional true crime podcast, that's not us. There's usually a good 15-20 minutes of us just talking shit about things, just whatever's been going on, and then we do the story, and then there's another 15-20 minutes of us just bullshitting. Throughout the story, we of course never make fun of any victim or, you know, anybody that was affected by it, but we will talk massive shit on the, you know, the perpetrator, the cops that involved that dropped the fucking ball. There's jokes all throughout it. Joel interrupts me every few minutes with a pun for the most part. It's not your traditional true crime. So if you like traditional, boring, not boring, I guess if it's your thing, it's your thing. But just
if you like
straightforward,
the boring shit, might as well just watch the news. But what you're saying is you're delivering this stuff in a great way, but while still keeping it tasteful.
The way I like to describe it is, you know, it's like you're sitting in a room with a couple of dudes that don't really know what they're talking about, but they know just enough to sound like they do, and you know, they're just shooting the shit about it, and you're just kind of listening. So that's kind of what our podcast is.
Great. And just before we take off, where can people find you at?
So they can find you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/totallycolecash. You can find me on there. That's the main place you're going to find all my wrestling stuff. Working on getting a Twitter back. I had a Twitter for a while, got rid of it. But yeah, you can go there. And then if you're in the area and you're listening, April 27th, Parkersburg, West Virginia, it's the Elks Lodge. Myself, hopefully against Logan Taylor. He's one of the kids I trained. I coined him the Killer. That kid throws strikes like nobody's business. And I can't fucking wait. If he accepts the challenge, I can't fucking wait to get in the ring with him. Test his jaw, see if my jaw still has it. It's gonna be a good one.
Hell yeah, I can't wait. You know, and I'm gonna be sure to, you know, spread the word about all of that. And I have to say, thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure, you know. It really has.
Thanks for having me, man. Anytime you want me on, let me know. I'll come back on. We can talk about
we'll
shit you want to get into.
Wrestling, man. We can do something, you know, paranormal and true crime. I like that kind of stuff.
Hell yeah, dude.
And you know what? Thank you everybody at home for watching. And as always, support indie wrestling. Versace Stoner out.
Welcome to the Kill City Cup. I got the world by the balls.